You ever have one of those mornings where everything feels just right? The kind of day where the world is quiet, the coffee is hot, and the only thing on your mind is the gentle ripple of the lake outside your window. That was me. Until a single email shattered my peace and set off a chain of events that would turn my life and my entire community upside down. I'm Mason Hale, and I bought this lake house for one reason: freedom. No HOA, no nosy neighbors, no rules about what color I can paint my door or how many solar panels I can bolt to the roof. Just me, my research, and the loons nesting by the shore. I'd spent months recording their calls for a federal wildlife study, and every day here felt like a small victory against the chaos of the outside world. But that morning, as I stood in my kitchen, watching the mist rise off the water, my phone buzzed. The subject line hit me like a punch. Event confirmation, Waterfront Community Day. My address. My dock. Detailed parking instructions for 80 confirmed guests. I blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake. But the email was real. Vendor confirmations, catering schedules, a hand-drawn map with arrows pointing straight to my private property. And at the bottom, a signature. Pamela Knox, HOA president and self-appointed venue coordinator. I actually laughed at first. Surely this was some kind of mix-up. But then I saw the attached invoice. Catering for 80, billed directly to me. My name, my address, my supposed responsibility. The laughter died in my throat. My hands shook as I pictured strangers swarming my dock, months of research destroyed in a single afternoon. I pulled up my property records, heart pounding. There it was. My name, sole owner, and, most importantly, my house sitting well outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I'd chosen this spot specifically to avoid their reach. No monthly meetings, no arbitrary rules, no one telling me how to live my life. But now it seemed the HOA had decided my property was theirs for the taking. I stared at the federal research permit on my wall. 8 weeks of baseline recordings, a 300-foot noise buffer mandated by law. If 80 people showed up, all that work would be ruined. The loons might never return. Years of research, gone, because someone decided to play queen of the neighborhood. That's when I realized this wasn't just a mistake. This was a hostile takeover, and I wasn't about to let it happen. I didn't waste a second. My first call was to the county office. The clerk on the other end listened as I explained the situation, her voice growing more concerned with every detail. "You need to document everything," she warned. "This could escalate quickly." That was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't just a neighborly misunderstanding. This was fraud, plain and simple. I printed every email, every invoice, every map. I took photos of my property lines, my research equipment, the federal permit hanging on my wall. I even pulled up the septic system permit. Maximum 12 guests allowed, not 80. Anything more would violate half a dozen county codes, not to mention federal research law. The more I dug, the more surreal it became. I needed backup. So I walked down the road to Rebecca Moore's house. She's my neighbor to the south, not part of the HOA either. And she's got a drone she uses to monitor lake health. When I showed her the email, her jaw dropped. "Pamela did what?" she said, shaking her head. "I've seen HOA overreach, but this is a new level." She pulled up the community message board on her tablet. There it was. Weeks of posts about the community waterfront celebration, all pointing to my house. Dozens of comments, families planning to swim, people asking about parking and food. My stomach twisted. How many people had Pamela convinced that my private lake house was somehow community property? That afternoon, I checked my security cameras. 3 different cars had driven down my private road in the past week, stopping at the gate, taking photos. One person even paced along the fence line, measuring with a tape. They were scouting my property like it was already theirs. The audacity was staggering. Nora, my partner, found me surrounded by paperwork. "We need to stop this before Saturday," she said, her voice steady but her eyes worried. I nodded, already drafting emails to the HOA board, the county, and every vendor I could identify. But first, I needed to know just how deep this went. How many people believed they had permission to use my land? How far had Pamela's lies spread? I called the catering company listed on the invoice. The manager sounded confused at first, then alarmed. "We have a signed contract from the HOA president," she said. She assured us all permissions were secured. My stomach dropped. $500 for food, $800 for equipment rental, all billed to me without my knowledge. The caterer's voice turned nervous. We were told this was a community event with full owner cooperation. I told her flatly, "You've been lied to. You might want to contact your legal department." As the sun set over the lake, I stood on the deck, watching the water turn gold. Instead of peace, I felt a storm brewing. Nearly 100 people, all thinking they had a right to my home. All because one woman decided her authority was more important than the law. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about standing up to someone who thought rules didn't apply to her, and I was ready to draw a line in the sand. Thursday morning, I headed to the hardware store for chain and padlocks. The place buzzed with early risers, contractors, weekend warriors, people with normal problems. I was about to defend my home from a full-scale invasion. As I compared locks, I overheard Rebecca's voice 2 aisles over. "Did you say the Hale place?" she asked. A vendor replied, "Yeah, big HOA event Saturday. Nearly 100 guests, full catering, the works." My grip tightened on the chain. Rebecca's response was icy. "That's private property. The owner is conducting federally protected research. There's no event happening." The vendor laughed nervously, but I could hear the doubt creeping in. Back in the parking lot, Rebecca slammed her tailgate shut. "This is systematic deception," she said. "Pamela's telling every business in town she has clearance." My mind raced. How many vendors had already committed resources based on Pamela's lies? How many would show up at my gate expecting a party? When I got home, my phone started buzzing. Neighbors, some I barely knew, called to ask about parking, bathrooms, even kayak launches. "The HOA bulletin said the event's at your place," one said. I kept my voice calm. "That's false information. My property isn't available for any gathering." The confusion in their voices was genuine. They weren't in on the scam. They were victims too. Nora came home to find the kitchen table covered in notes, names, and numbers. She scanned the list. "This many people can't all be lying," she said. "They're not," I replied. "They're being lied to. Pamela's weaponizing the community against us." The realization hit hard. This wasn't just about my property. It was about trust, and how easily it could be twisted. That evening, Rebecca called. "You need to see this." I drove over, and she showed me the community message board. Thread after thread about Saturday's event. People asking about dogs, vegetarian options, swimming conditions, all assuming my property was the venue. But the most chilling part was the way Pamela had painted me to the community. Notoriously antisocial. Probably agreed just to avoid confrontation. Difficult researcher. She'd been laying the groundwork for weeks, turning me into the villain before I even knew there was a story. I stopped by the local bait shop, where lake residents gather for news and gossip. The owner, Jim, greeted me with a grin. "Big day Saturday, huh?" My silence made him pause. "Pamela was in here with maps, showing everyone your beach access. Said the HOA finally got community use rights." My jaw clenched. She'd shown maps of my private property to half the town. Walking back to my truck, I saw flyers on the community board. Waterfront Family Day Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Location, Hale Research Property. Activities, phone numbers, the works. Not my number, probably Pamela's. The scale of her scheme was staggering. The web was tightening, and I was running out of time. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw crowds trampling my research site, months of work destroyed in a single afternoon. But I wasn't just worried about my data. I was angry. Angry that someone could so casually rewrite reality, and that so many people would believe her without question. Friday morning, the phone rang. "This is Patricia Collins from Lakeshore Liability Protection, calling about your special event policy for tomorrow." My coffee cup froze midair. "What special event?" I asked. She hesitated. "The community celebration. Your HOA president applied for additional liability coverage." Pamela had tried to buy insurance using my property, without my knowledge. Patricia's tone shifted instantly when I explained the fraud. "Without explicit owner consent, there's no policy. This application will be flagged for deception review." The seriousness in her voice told me this was no longer just a neighborhood squabble. This was criminal. An hour later, a county vehicle pulled into my driveway. The environmental health inspector stepped out, clipboard in hand. "We've had reports of increased traffic for the weekend. Need to verify your septic permit." I showed him the paperwork. Maximum 12 guests, no commercial use. His eyebrows shot up. "Nearly 100 people on a 12-guest system? That's an immediate violation." He walked the property line, taking photos, and handed me his card. "Call if anyone shows up. We'll have enforcement ready." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. The law was on my side, but the calls kept coming. An event coordinator reached out, offering day of management services. A wedding photographer called, asking about backup dates. Apparently, Pamela was already planning future events at my house. Each new contact was another thread in her web of lies. Nora came home to find me surrounded by business cards and printouts. "How many people has she contacted?" she asked, alarmed. "Caterers, planners, even insurance agents," I replied. An entire ecosystem built on land she doesn't own. Nora read the fraud notice I'd drafted, her teacher instincts kicking in. We need to document everything. This could mean federal charges, Rebecca called with another update. Pamela's at the grocery store, telling people you're charging the HOA for access, that the community voted to pay you, but you're being difficult. My grip tightened on the phone. Pamela was building a narrative where I was the villain, the one spoiling everyone's fun. She was weaponizing the community's trust, turning neighbors into unwitting accomplices. Then, the final straw. A letter from the HOA attorney requesting property access confirmation and citing historical use patterns. All fabricated. My own attorney listened in disbelief. This isn't just deception, he said. It's conspiracy. Document everything. When this unravels, the liability exposure is massive. That night, I installed motion sensor cameras, printed permit copies, and prepared statements for confused guests. Nora organized bottled water and information sheets. We were ready for a showdown. The chain and padlock sat on the counter, heavy and cold. A promise that tomorrow, my boundaries would be enforced. The storm was about to break. Saturday dawned with a golden haze over the lake, but my nerves were electric. I hadn't slept, too many scenarios running through my mind. Would 100 people really show up? Would Pamela try to force her way in? Would the community turn on me, or finally see the truth? Nora handed me coffee and a camera. Ready? She asked. I nodded, grabbing the heavy chain and padlock. Rebecca's message pinged. Drone prepped. Recording for my property. Legal documentation starting now. This wasn't just about stopping a party. It was about creating undeniable evidence for whatever came next. We drove the quarter-mile to my gate. The metal frame gleamed in the morning light. No trespassing signs already posted. I threaded the steel loop through the gate, the padlock clicking shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. Nora took photos, Rebecca's drone circled overhead, and neighbors watched from their porches, coffee in hand. The message was clear. This was private land, federally protected, and absolutely off-limits. By 9:15, the first car arrived. A sedan, the driver confused by the chain. I met her at the gate, handed her an information sheet, and explained calmly, private property, federal research site. Fraud documented? She'd brought her elderly mother for a lake outing but left embarrassed, thanking me for pointing her to the public beach. Rebecca's drone captured everything, timestamps, license plates, peaceful resolution. No drama, just facts. 20 minutes later, a minivan pulled up. Kids pressed their faces to the windows, parents scanning the posted documents. I explained again. No event, private research land, federal protection. They realized they'd nearly trespassed, apologized, and left. Disappointment written on their faces. A fisherman from the local group stopped by, not for the event, but to show support. He shook my hand, praised the research, and took photos as proof against HOA overreach. By 10:30, only 3 vehicles had appeared. No Pamela, no catering trucks, no crowd of angry families. Just an empty road, a locked gate, and the sound of bird song. Rebecca landed her drone, reviewing the footage. This is actually kind of anticlimactic, she said. But that was the point. The community had fact-checked itself. The crisis had been averted not by confrontation, but by information. The physical barrier was now a symbol, not a battleground. Nora packed up the camera equipment. Think she'll show up? I shook my head. Pamela had to know the event had collapsed. Registration had dropped to almost nothing. The community had turned against her. Even showing her face would mean admitting catastrophic failure. The morning stretched toward noon, the tension slowly dissolving into relief. My property was secure, my research was safe, and the truth had finally won. By early afternoon, the last of the would-be guests had turned away, confusion and frustration giving way to realization. The only real traffic was a catering van, forced by contract to show up for a final site inspection. The driver, Miguel, looked exhausted as he read the federal warning signs and the laminated deed posted on the gate. We've got $1,500 worth of food and nowhere to serve it, he said, shaking his head. Pamela promised us access. We turned down 3 other jobs for this. I signed a statement for his insurance, confirming I'd never authorized the event. Rebecca's drone hovered overhead, capturing every moment for the record. A few more cars trickled in. Families with picnic baskets, kids in swimsuits, parents looking for answers. I handed out information sheets, explained the situation, and pointed them to the public beach. Some were angry, others embarrassed, but most just seemed stunned. One mother, her voice trembling, asked, "Did anyone actually check with you before planning all this?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Then, as if on cue, a county ranger arrived. She took statements, photographed the scene, and assured me that the law was on my side. "You did everything right," she said. "If anyone tries to force entry, call us immediately." The official support was a relief, but the real victory was watching the community's reaction shift from confusion to accountability. Word spread quickly. Parents called friends, warning them not to come. The fishing group posted photos of the locked gate and federal signs, reminding everyone that my property had always been off limits for events. The HOA message board exploded with questions. Why didn't anyone verify this? How did Pamela get away with it for so long? The narrative was unraveling in real time. By 1 p.m., the road was empty. The only sounds were the calls of the loons and the quiet hum of Rebecca's drone. Nora brought lunch to the gate, and we sat together, watching the lake. It was a surreal picnic, celebrating not a confrontation, but the power of truth and boundaries. And just when the dust seemed to settle, the real consequences began. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Vendors posted warnings online, urging others to verify property rights before booking events. The local newspaper reached out for comment, and I gave a careful statement. My property was never available. The HOA president acted without authority. Federal research protections were maintained, and right here, as the fallout spread and the community finally saw the truth, is the perfect moment to remind you, if you love stories where justice prevails and the underdog stands their ground, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. But the story wasn't over. Pamela's web of lies was about to unravel in ways no one expected. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The HOA board, desperate to save face, accepted Pamela's immediate resignation. The community message boards lit up with apologies, outrage, and a new sense of vigilance. Parents who'd planned their kids' weekends around the event now demanded answers. Vendors, out thousands of dollars, threatened legal action. The fishing group, the local businesses, even the real estate agents. Everyone was talking about the scandal that had nearly turned my quiet lake house into a cautionary tale. But the most satisfying part? The community began to self-correct. Residents dug into public records, posted county maps, and shared screenshots proving my property was never under HOA control. The narrative flipped. I wasn't the villain. I was the one who'd protected the lake, the research, and the community from a disaster. Even the local school used the incident as a civics lesson, teaching kids about property rights and the importance of verifying information. Meanwhile, the legal consequences for Pamela mounted. Insurance companies flagged her for fraud. Vendors filed claims. The county prosecutor opened an investigation into her actions. The HOA rewrote its bylaws, instituting strict checks on presidential authority and mandatory property verification for all future events. What started as one woman's power trip ended up transforming the entire association. As for me, the research continued. 8 weeks of pristine loon recordings, undisturbed by human noise. The federal permit was renewed, and my work was published in a national conservation journal. The lake, once threatened by chaos, became a symbol of what happens when a community stands up for the truth. Neighbors who once saw me as a recluse now stopped by to ask about the loons, the research, and the story that had put our little corner of the world on the map. The chain and padlock stayed on the gate for a while, a silent reminder that boundaries matter. But eventually, I replaced them with a small, official plaque, United States Fish and Wildlife Service, Protected Study Area. The message was clear. This land was not just private, but protected, respected, and valued. Nora and I sat on the dock one evening, watching the sun set over the water. "Was it worth it?" she asked. I looked at the calm lake, the thriving wildlife, the community that had learned to question authority and defend what mattered. "Absolutely," I said. "Not just for us, but for everyone who believes in standing their ground. If you've made it this far, thank you for being part of this journey. And if you want to know how it feels when an HOA member throws trash in your yard at midnight, then watch my next video that is showing on the screen. Guard your peace. I know I'll guard mine." That's it for now from HOA victims. Make sure you're subscribed and the bell is on. The next story might just top this.